So we got good news and we got bad news when it comes to teams of Central Indiana and football on this Friday, where here's the thing. We had a big storm, right? We just underwent a big winter storm. And you thought that once the winter storm was over with and the snow looks pretty and the sky is blue and the sun comes out and it really is picturesque. And you think to yourself, we had the storm, we weathered the storm, we cleaned the roads, everything's good. And then today, we find out that we're going to have 2 to 4 inches here over the course of today, and it gets a little cloudy again. It's a little murky. We have a feeling now of how the city's going to look and how the roads are going to look, but then all of a sudden, when we expected everything to be cleared out and into the weekend, there was going to be no hassle, no problem, a little bit more falls down on us. Which is kind of how things feel when it comes to navigating what went wrong for the Indianapolis Colts. Sure, we underwent the storm. We saw them finish 8-9, and we saw that the owner was proud of that they fought hard to finish 8-9, and we knew that the general manager and the head coach were going to be back. And so we weathered that storm. We watched it all fall before us. We watched the snow come down, and we're like, okay, what's the vision? We'll let it clear out and see if the roads are a little bit more, able to be navigated. And then today, a little bit more snow falls. And by that I mean, Chris Ballard just got done talking to the local media, well, I guess the national media as well, and addressing and breaking down the Colts season. And it kind of felt like rinse repeat. I'm not going to lie to you. He's obligated to do it at the end of each year. I understand that. And I don't think he's a bad guy. He is definitely a more humble guy. And he says what you expect him to say. Look, we got to do better. I let us down in these areas. We didn't navigate through the way that we wanted. We didn't put out on the field the team that people wanted to see play. And we're an 8-9 football team. We got to own that we're an 8-9 football team. Okay? Now, with all of that, Jimmy, here's where I thought Chris Ballard could have gone back and looked at his own transcript of the press conference and learned from it. Okay?
From this year's or from previous?
From today.
Okay.
In the press conference today, Chris Ballard said, look, when it comes to free agency, we have not yet formulated a plan as to what our targets are going to be. Later, when he was talking about things, he was saying, we have to do a better job of prioritizing, and we've got to find better players via free agency. You just got done admitting that you haven't formulated a plan. I would bet you, I don't know this, okay? I would bet you, and I know that there's still football to be played, and I know that free agency has not opened up yet. I would bet you right now that the Kansas City Chiefs, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Baltimore Ravens, I would bet you right now if you stopped any of their people in the hallway and said, give me your top 18 free agents in the NFL available this year and then tell me the 6 that you're most interested in, they would literally be able to say, thank you. And even though it might not have been a direct take this as the most important comment of the day from Chris Ballard, when he says we have yet to start formulating a plan, that to me, it was not raining when Noah built the ark. You have to have a plan beyond just like what falls into your lap, right? I would bet you that at all times, Thomas Bryant just got done with a game for the Pacers where he had 22-8. Thomas Bryant, to those of us that cover the Pacers or those that talk about the Pacers or go to Pacer games or Pacer fans, they probably 3 weeks ago had no idea that Thomas Bryant was on the radar of the Pacers. And when Moses Brown got released, we're like, gosh, I thought he played okay. He was a big body. They're absolutely stripped down at the center position. And literally within a week of that happening, they make a trade for like a 2,108-year second-round pick for Thomas Bryant. Basically free money, and Thomas Bryant comes in, and you go, oh, wow. He plays a style that like looks a lot like what they're wanting to play anyway when the guy he's filling in for is playing. This looks like it had some foresight to it. Yes, because I would guarantee you that the Pacers as an organization had a list of here are the 20 players that would be available via trade, via free agency, whatever else. I'm not saying, sure, and I'm hoping that I'm wrong in this. I'm hoping I'm wrong when I say that it sounds like Chris Ballard admitted to the fact that the Colts have yet to come up with that list. Surely they have it.
Yeah, I would have a hard time believing that just because the people under you, like you have scouts and specific personnel as a general manager that are assigned to be monitoring all sorts of avenues of that business, Jake, whether it is potential draft talent or whether it is a long board of upcoming free agents in 2025 or 2026. Fans do this. Fans will map out what next year's free agency class is going to look like and do it on fan sites and fan blogs. So, yeah, there's no way that there is not some type of, bare bones foundation for, hey, this is the list of free agents that we're expecting. I mean, maybe Chris Ballard isn't focused specifically on that immediately as his primary care choice, but I would have a hard time believing out of all the different scouts and personnel below him that they are not having a list or a foundation for who's upcoming in March. Right? Yeah, there's no way.
But we'll get into more over the course of today what Chris Ballard had to say. The gist of it is this. The gist of it is that Chris Ballard came out and said essentially what we heard a year ago, and that is, look, I have to do better. The accountability stops with me. Some of the things that took place in terms of this locker room and things like, for example, the side distractions, the podcast stuff from Zaire Franklin, guys talking to the media. He was not happy that the player that said that there was no vision wouldn't put his name on it. If you don't want players speaking anonymously about the leadership of the organization, then provide a leadership so they don't have to say it. And that's not me throwing a stone at Chris Ballard. Chris Ballard threw a stone at himself by later saying, I didn't provide that leadership. He said that, not me. I did appreciate that at one point he said, look, I'm a fan also. There are baseball and basketball teams that I'm a fan of, and I question the way that they do things, so I understand the scrutiny. I understand being asked about it. And that sort of transparency, that sort of humility, I can appreciate. But the thing to me that I took from today's press conference, and I think most people probably heard it, but all of the things that were being pointed out and addressed were things that had been pointed out and addressed routinely. And when he talks about things like getting another opportunity or, they're not close, this is not year two, right? I mean, it's not year two. We're going into the 9th year now, the 9th.
Well, and he also sets a bar when talking about what close is. One of the quotes that he has is addressing what you outlined. No, we're not close. 8 and 9 isn't close. I'm slightly paraphrasing here. Close is being a play away from the Super Bowl. Well, they're not even in the ballpark for that. They're not a play away from being within a breath of the AFC South title. So the bar he's set for himself in year 9 is, hey, close is being a play away from the Super Bowl. Well, how do you expect to make that up in a year? If that's where you're saying the standard is for what close should be. Because I agree with him. 9 years in, you should be in the conversation for Super Bowl opportunities or conference championship opportunities. To have this gap of close is not 8 and 9, but say close is a play away from the Super Bowl, where are you turning that around in 6 months? Where are you turning that around in one offseason?
Couple of things that he talked about, Jimmy, that I think would have prevented a turnaround, so to speak. Let's begin with this. Chris Ballard was asked about Anthony Richardson, the development of Anthony Richardson, having a young quarterback, and the play of Joe Flacco. And he said something to me that I thought was very interesting. Here's Ballard just about an hour ago.
We'll bring who we think is, the best guy we can bring in. I'll say this about Joe Flacco. Joe can still play. I think you saw that. He had for a guy that's turning 40, still moves better than I anticipated, still can throw the freaking football and still can win games. In terms of the age and where it comes from, I'm not ready to stamp that right now. But look, we did it the year before with Gardner. We brought a guy in that played pretty good football for us. I thought Joe had his moments of playing really good football for us. I thought at the end he thought he played really good. So I'm not ready to target, where it'll come from or who it'll be or what age they'll be. I don't know that yet.
Okay, so he doesn't know what age it'll be, but listen to what he says about Anthony Richardson's growth, and there's a reason why I think these things correlate.
Well, sometimes with your kids, and look, he's a young man, you expect them to do things and they don't do them. Like, hey, clean your room, okay? They don't do it. Well, and you're right, he was voted by his team a captain. And not doing the things consistently that needed to be done, that is correct. And it was a part of the learning, okay? It's part of the growth and learning. Do you wish they all came in there and were perfect pros from the get-go? Absolutely you do. But that's not the case, We got to help them grow. And there's going to be moments of failure. Failure, like I have really messed up in the past using that word so hard because really, in reality, failure can be a good thing if you grow from it, if you really learn from it, if you really learn from the experience. Struggle and failure are good. They're not bad things if you learn and grow from them. And that's what, we'll continue to hope that he continues to learn from those mistakes. He had good moments. It wasn't like it was just this constant, we're at the bottom and he's making all these mistakes all the way. No. He had really good moments, and then he kind of took a step back. That happens. It does. It's life. People make mistakes. You've wrote things that have not been perfect. You won't admit it, but you've done it. And to live in a world that you can't, all of a sudden you get branded because you make a mistake, and you do it on the grand stage, and we ostracize them for it? No.
Okay. At one point, Chris Ballard had also said about Anthony Richardson that in a perfect world, you don't have a young quarterback start right away. In a perfect world, as a matter of fact, I jotted down exactly what he said. In a perfect world, you should sit and watch at the quarterback position. We don't live in a perfect world. Now, they had that opportunity, right?
Correct, last year.
Well, going back, in a perfect world, you have a young quarterback sit and watch the veteran, but we don't live in a perfect world. The Colts lived in a perfect world at one time, pre-Chris Ballard, and they had the opportunity for a young quarterback to sit and watch a veteran at the end of his career, but at that moment, it wasn't the perfect world either, and so they decided not to let Andrew Luck sit and watch, but rather to make that transition. It was the right call at the time, don't get me wrong.
Well, and that's a whole philosophical conversation as well.
Understood. But what I'm saying is, right now, you now are admitting with Anthony Richardson that in a perfect world, you have him sit and watch. They didn't have a plan when they got in Anthony Richardson to have him pushed, and they handed him the keys too early. You heard him talk about Joe Flacco there, and they don't know what kind of player they're going to bring in now to replace Joe Flacco. They need to get one that is going to push Anthony Richardson, because if you live in a perfect world where a quarterback should sit and watch, and you weren't in that position, so you handed him the keys because there was nobody else to drive the car for you, you need a situation where the quarterback, at the very least, feels like there is somebody that can start for him. Because he was handed the keys too early, that's where they erred. They live in an imperfect world.
Can I share with you my issue with Ballard's comment? All I hear when I hear him say, to paraphrase your quote, in a perfect world, you sit a young quarterback, is an excuse. Like, I'm sorry. The situation that Anthony Richardson came into, you could talk about how topsy-turvy the Colts organization has been the last 5 or 7 years. That's fine. But in terms of structure, with a new head coach in Shane Steichen, who believed in him, with an offensive line that was still relatively solid, with a couple of weapons around him, we wanted more, but a couple of weapons there are far worse situations to be thrown into. When I hear him say, well, in a perfect world, he would have sat a year, I hear an excuse. That's all that is to me, is an excuse, is trying to buy more time with the Anthony Richardson saga. Like, yeah, maybe he would have been a quicker development had he sat and learned, but we've seen quarterbacks get thrown to the fire that it works out for. All of that is a philosophical argument of, do you sit the guy or do you start him right away? But the idea with hindsight after the fact saying, oh man, yeah, had we been able to sit him longer, or later he says a similar quote about him getting benched this season, Jake. He says, I would have liked the pause to have been longer. You're the general manager of the team. If you have an issue with what your head coach is doing in making an about face in 2 weeks and throwing Anthony Richardson back out there, and you as the overseer of this operation think to yourself, well, I don't know. I think maybe a little bit more time could have been spent him resting and pausing and taking a breath. You can't say that at the end of the season presser like, oh, well, a longer pause might have been helpful. You're in the room. You have the opportunity to say,
well,
hey,
you should be
Steichen,
the final say,
correct.
other than the owner,
yeah,
right?
You should be able to tell Shane, hey, make it 2 more weeks. I don't think he's ready. You can't say it after the fact like, oh, you're some victim in this whole process. But that just sounds like an excuse to me, the whole thing of, oh, well, if we could go back in a perfect world, we should sit him. You had that choice. You clearly have the longest leash in professional football from your owner to bide time and make decisions carefully. Don't come at me now 2 years later and say, well, we should have sat him. That was the right move. If you rushed it, that's on you. That's on nobody else but your decision-making. You don't get to sit there with hindsight and another year of job security and say, well, maybe it was a better call to sit him, but we didn't have the time.
I do think that he was asked a really good question about does his, and it's weird to say get over-aggressive or accelerate timeline, but because he's entering year number 9 and he's looking for results, does Chris Ballard now accelerate his timeline and take risks? It's kind of like if you are at a point in your life where you go, oh, you know what? I never really established my 401k the way I wanted to. So now I've got to start making investments that are higher risk investments because I'm playing catch up. Is Chris Ballard, when it comes to his future or his stability in going into year number 9, is he now in a position where he's going to have to take bigger risk to try to play catch up? I thought it was a very good question from Greg Doyle, and here's what he had to say.
It's not in my nature I'm not going to hamstring this organization for the next 3 or 4 years. No, we will do what we need to do to build the best team we can build that can get this thing going forward. And if we think it's a situation where, okay, this is worth it, we would do it. But it's one where I'm not going to be irresponsible. I wouldn't do that.
Now, is that to say he's been responsible all the way up into this point? Because you could make the argument that irresponsibility is ignoring free agency to an extent. I understand that you don't ever want to, and we are going to be catch-22 here, okay? You don't want to have to rely on free agency. If you are relying on other teams' cast-offs to build your roster, you're in a world of hurt. But free agency can accentuate a roster. And I think the Colts have failed in accentuating their roster properly in terms of free agency. But now going into it, we heard Chris Ballard say they haven't yet really started to formulate a plan. His thoughts now entering into, once we get involved with it, free agency this year.
Last year, we didn't completely abstain from free agency, and we've actually done things in the past. So I just think we have to do a better job identifying the free agents that we want to sign and then being able to close the deal on them. And that's up to me. It really is. It's not Mr. Irsay. He'll let me do what I need to do. And my staff. We have to be able to do that.
Now, again, I would go back to, I assume the one area that they're going to need to bring in free agents is not necessarily to get yourself starters, but to push the starters you have in place if you feel that they are young guys that can play. And the Colts have, to summarize, there was nothing overly groundbreaking in today's press conference. Chris Ballard said that the defensive coordinator position is a hire that Shane Steichen will make. Ballard will obviously have input. The defensive coaches that are on staff are still here, and that will then be evaluated by whoever they bring in as the defensive coordinator. He said that he saw really good things out of Anthony Richardson, and in fact, there were times where Richardson might have had even better moments that were taken away due to penalties and other such things that in the vacuum you don't notice, but when you look back on it in a bigger picture, you can see that there were proper steps. He is very clearly aware of the fact that the quarterback position is the one that is going to be the most important in terms of the trajectory of the franchise. And he said a lot of the one thing that Chris Ballard, I recall this. I recall when I was doing the morning show with Kevin Bowen, and there's a specific reason I remember so blatantly or so clearly him saying this. Blatantly is the wrong word. But I remember Kevin Bowen asking Chris Ballard if he felt he was on the hot seat. And Chris Ballard said, no, I have a college degree, so I can get another job. And I have determined what that other job is. I don't know if these things, though, and this is the unfortunate thing, Chris Ballard is in this position partially because the blueprint of football that he has come up with is a little bit antiquated. Not come up with, but stuck with. And I think that he talked about being more aware of that. Things like, the defensive scheme they used this year, which, Jimmy, we've talked about. Probably not as hybrid as what we see in today's, as he said, it's a nickel-friendly league, right? And they were going with, pass rush-friendly league, which they've gotten away from that a little bit. The rest of the league has. It's a speed league, not necessarily a collision big man league. But some of the areas that Chris Ballard has tried to blueprint this franchise were really good in 1990s football. Run the football, have a good guard, have a good linebacker. Like I've always said, this team was built as if it was an NBA team that was built around Sam Cassell, Dikembe Mutombo, and Charles Oakley. Those guys were fabulous basketball players in a different era of the NBA. I think that he has seen that he needs to modernize it, but you don't do it with the snap of the finger. You've got to overhaul some things. Along those lines, the area that I think he could have a fabulous secondary career, if this one goes awry, unfortunately is probably also antiquated. Because what I think he'd be great at is this. There was a time, primarily in the 80s, where everybody had a little desktop tear-off page calendar. There were little plastic contraptions you put on your desk, and you had one that was Ziggy or The Far Side or Sniglets or whatever, or Jeopardy question a day or a sports fun fact of the day. And each day you tore it off, right? Oh, did you see? September the 9th, the trivia question was about Indiana basketball. That's pretty cool. And you tear it off. September the 10th, the next day is about whatever. Those calendars are probably antiquated, which is too bad because the Chris Ballard second career, if he wants it, is catchphrases and cliches when it comes to talking sports. He does it as well as anybody. Things that he says about, when talking about his own humility or his own lessons or, failure's only failure if you fail to learn from it. Things like that. I understand why, quite frankly, he was seen as a rising star amongst the NFL executives. I understand why he would be an excellent interviewer in a job interview. And I'm not saying that he's an incompetent general manager, but he is very smooth at coming up with the right cliches and the right things that make the appearance and the inference that he is going to smooth things over and get the ship righted. The problem is those tear-off of the day quotes that he's come up with are the same that he used in 22, the same that he used in 21, the same that he used in 23, and eventually we've got to start seeing results. Now, Notre Dame had great results last night. That game, you knew. I'm at dinner with the Australians, right? Australians. So, like, when they think football, they think Aussie rules football. They think of the Roos in North Melbourne and that kind of thing. But even as we're watching it, Marcus, the Australian, says, man, this big if Notre Dame can get any points at the end of the half here because they get the ball to start the second half. And as soon as Notre Dame went down and started the second half and scored, you knew then you had a game. And I said, no discredit to Notre Dame. But, Jimmy, Penn State football, when it comes to big games, the last 20 years is the movie Full Metal Jacket. First half is always awesome. And then things get really dreary and dark in the second half. That's exactly what happened to Penn State last night. But Notre Dame is the one that gets credit for that because those guys made plays when they had to. The interception into the guy that you questioned, and I don't mean to call you out. I'm
you're
saying
fine.
Everybody, right?
Yes.
That was, I'm saying it for credit and kudos to that kid to kick that field goal because it's been a rough year for him.
I questioned Mitch Jeter, and if we got to this at some point today, was going to issue a public apology to him because there were shaky moments. There were a lot of jokes made. I was a part of that group leading up to the Indiana game about how shaky he was during the regular season. They had media availability, and he's hitting kicks off the crossbar. He has been nearly perfect in the playoff, and every single time they have needed something from his leg, especially late in games, he has been there. I know we'll get into this more with Tom Noy, the South Bend Tribune, coming up, but yes, there is truth to Penn State struggles the last 20 years. This is a Notre Dame team that has dealt with a ton of injury adversity, no more so maybe than last night when they're down 2 offensive linemen. They overcame a lot and earned that spot in the national championship game on the 20th.
Tom Noy covered that game. He is going to join us next. Then your phone calls on the Colts. Mo, give us a call back in just a little bit as well. We do have a big show lined up. Tom Noy coming up just a couple of minutes from now. Then Dave Rebson of the Big Ten Network, I should say, at 1 o'clock. We're going to do a 2-minute drill today, Jimmy. We're bringing back the 2-minute drill for the playoffs, right? Kylan has said, you know what? I like the challenge. Let's whip it around. Let's go to different cities.
You get your TSA pre-set to go?
That's right.
Are you in that club?
I even got you on there, by the way.
Thanks.
We're going to get you bottom of the hour in the 1 o'clock hour for the 2-minute drill. Kevin Bowen going to join us. We'll talk more Ballard as well. So we've got a cornucopia, a potpourri of subjects. But Tom Noy, who covered that game last night for Notre Dame, joins us next. Dave Pasch last night on ESPN Radio, the call as the Orange Bowl goes to the Irish down in Miami Gardens, and Miami Notre Dame as a result now advances to the national championship game in Atlanta. If you were a listener of this program, you would know two things. Number one, you would know that it was going to be Ohio State and Notre Dame in the national championship game, as predicted by Query Damas here when the college football playoff seedings came out. And number two, you would know that Tom Noy has become a friend of the program and doesn't know it yet, but we've actually put him on the payroll. He joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line from the South Bend Tribune. And Tom, to me, that game last night kind of typified really the Notre Dame season. You know, you have kind of disappointment early where your eyes are awakened a little bit, and then no panic from the Irish, and Marcus Freeman just kind of guides his team to stay with who they are, and in the end, they make the plays that Penn State could not. Thanks for joining us. Your overall reaction to that game last night?
They're down 10-0, their largest deficit of the season. They're down 10-3 at halftime. Then it's back and forth, 10-10, 17-10, 17-17. And you never got the feeling sitting there in the press box of Hard Rock Stadium that this was the end. Like, you're watching the clock, you're watching the drives, you're watching guys go out and get hurt, guys come back and after being hurt, and you're just thinking to yourself, I don't know how the heck this thing is going to end, but I know one thing. Notre Dame's going to just find a way to figure it out, whether it's a big interception from Christian Gray or the field goal from Mitch Jeter or a big drive from the offense. Like, we've seen so much from this team, especially in the postseason, that you just sit there and you think, yeah, they're going to win. And then they wind up winning again.
Tom, more improbable performance, Steve Angeli leading them down the field for points at the end of the half, or Jayden Gracehouse setting the mark for season-high yards and receptions and being the X factor for them down the stretch in that game?
How about if I just go off the board and say neither? Because with Steve Angeli, we saw that Steve Angeli in the Sun Bowl last year. So it's like it's always in him, and there's a reason why Steve Angeli is still on the Notre Dame football roster and not earning a better paycheck somewhere else because he wants to be the starter. He believes in his heart that he should be and he will be the starting quarterback at Notre Dame in 2025. And it's like you're bringing on all these guys. It's Riley Leonard. It's Tyler Buckner. It's Sam Hartman. I'm still just going to be me and go out and do what I do. But to go off the board, I'm not going to choose Greathouse. I'm not going to choose Steve Angeli. I'm going with Charles Jagasaw. Now, let's go back to the story of Charles Jagasaw. He started the season as the left tackle. He was going to be the starting left tackle as a redshirt freshman. Tore his pec first day of camp. Gone for the year. He comes back and starts practicing late in the season, and then all of a sudden, oh, by the way, Rocco Spindler goes out at right guard. They need a right guard. Who do they call on for the second half of a game against Penn State? Charles Jagasaw plays the entire second half at right guard in his first action of the season. It's just another guy in a long line of, man, they can't afford to lose this guy, that guy, that guy. They lose all those guys. They just run somebody in off the bench who's never played guard and holds his own, and the Irish go on to advance to the national championship game.
Tom, you know what this reminded me of, and Notre Dame fans are going to hate when they hear me say this. Indiana fans are too, probably. But we use the system of relativity, right, of things that we can relate to or that we know well when we're watching something that's new. And as I watched this team with Marcus Freeman, it kind of harkened back to me to when Mike Davis took Indiana to the national championship game. Year 2, not year 3 or 3 plus a bowl game in this case. But Mike Davis, when he did that, he had this good roster that had veteran players. He had a really good assistant coach in John Treelor. And, in the moment, it was like, oh, my gosh, Indiana's problems are solved. This guy's going to be here forever as the head coach, and he's young, and he's got everything you want. And obviously, water kind of found its level there in the case of Indiana. With Marcus Freeman, how has he grown? Because it doesn't feel like that in the term that, I think Marcus Freeman is the long-term guy. I don't think this is like young guy that kind of struck gold and then water's going to find its level. What has he done to learn as a coach through this process of the last 2 to 3 years that make yes, in fact, this is now going to be the standard?
He has to be himself, and he wasn't himself the first 2 years. He was, I think, playing the part or playing a role that he believed he had to play as the head coach of the University of Notre Dame football program, whether that was as a 36-year-old or a 37-year-old. I think this year he's like, you know what, I'm just going to be me. I'm going to be a guy who loves coaching ball, who's a position coach at heart. I want to have the relationship with the players. I don't care. I'm not going to care as much about the outside perception as I did the first couple of years. And I'm just going to go win. And if there's a massive loss like they had against Northern Illinois, I'm not going to let that affect me and how I do my job. And I'm still going to try to squeeze every ounce of effort and energy out of this football team as I can. And we're going to have success. And now you're seeing Marcus Freeman, ironically, turned 39 years old when the clock struck midnight after the game last night. And now you're seeing a 39-year-old who's comfortable with who he is and, more importantly, where he is.
Tom, can you quantify what's happened the last 2 weeks? I tried to a little bit last night on Twitter. For people that are Notre Dame fans around my age or one of our fellow staff members, Kevin Bowen's age, in their 30s, give or take, you've never seen significant success from Notre Dame on the grandest stage. And I know there's still one game to play, but you go 31 years without a significant bowl win, and now you've had two in a span of 7 days with the, as Jake outlined, the magic that's well documented of third-year head coaches at Notre Dame. But to try to quantify what all this means to this fan base and Notre Dame fans around the same era as me or maybe a little older that have grown up on those past laurels but have never seen it themselves.
This is just something that you're going to have to really just take a step back and look at in April or May or June or when you're on the golf course in the summertime and just be like, wait, Notre Dame just did what? Because even coming back on the shuttle, the media shuttle back to the hotel where the media was at last night, you're thinking, what you just said, it's been 31 years since they did something like this, and then they go do it twice in the span of 8 freaking days? Like, what are we watching here? It's moving too fast, and everything's happening in such a blur that you just can't stop and think, boy, they're really in some uncharted territory right now. You just buckle up right now and you just enjoy the ride and see where it's going to go.
Tom, when you look at Tom Noyes, our guest, Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, who covers Notre Dame, they're on to the title game now. I don't know how much you've had a chance to or even talked to schematically when looking forward to the potential matchup of Ohio State and Texas. I know Ohio State's loaded. They've got 17 receivers that could all start for the Colts tomorrow. I'm being exaggerating, but you get the point. Matchup-wise, just in terms of scheme, not necessarily skill, but scheme, is there a preferred matchup for Notre Dame?
I don't think so. Yeah, I do. I think they want Ohio State because I still think even after all they've accomplished this season, even after all they've accomplished in the postseason, the 10 men on the field thing really eats at them. And Marcus Freeman, if you shot him full of truth serum, would say, yeah, I want another shot at Ohio State because we felt like we had these guys beat last year at Notre Dame, and we didn't do what we needed to do to win that game. And if there's ever a chance we ever get another chance at Ohio State, he'll say, I guarantee you we'll be the most prepared, focused, ready-to-play football team that you'll ever see. So I think, of course, they're going to say, doesn't matter who we play, we're playing for the national championship. Let's go win one for the first time since 1988. But I think deep down, Marcus Freeman would be like, I really want that Ohio State chance again.
Are we past the point of the injuries mattering? I mean, obviously up front with the offensive line, like you hope everybody's able to get healthy there. Losing 2 offensive linemen in a game like that and surviving is crazy. But regardless of matchup, are we past the point where Irish fans should worry about the other shoe dropping with all they've lost this year?
Absolutely, because they've lost it. They've lost at every single imaginable position that you can't lose. They've lost guys. They even lost Riley Leonard for a series yesterday, and we'll see how that turned out. Like, it's to the point now where the depth and the talent is so deep and the reserve is just so plentiful here that you're like, somebody's going to go down, but you know what? Somebody else is going to step up and make a play. Like Jeremiah Love was compromised last night, but there was so much confidence in Aeneas Williams as a true freshman that he was going to have a chance to make some plays, and guess what? The guy makes some plays. So it's like whoever goes out, whoever's lost, like you're looking down on the field, Benjamin Morrison's walking around in his jersey and street clothes, and Riley Mills is on crutches, and Howard Cross can barely walk, and you're just like, how is this team? What are they? How are they 14-1? It's mind-boggling to think of what they've been able to overcome with all these injuries.
So I'm trying to think, and I can't believe I just completely spaced this. Their last game before the Orange Bowl, where did they play, Jimmy? Last. I mean, I know they played Indiana, right?
Yeah.
So when they played
New
Georgia,
Orleans.
where'd they play them?
New Orleans.
New Orleans. Okay, so Tom, we talked about this. You go from New Orleans, and I know that obviously it was a terrible circumstance there, right? But New Orleans is a great city and a vibrant, artistic, fun city. You know, Miami, you go to beautiful weather. I mean, Miami, Hard Rock Stadium, all that. And now you go to Atlanta. It's kind of a buzzkill, isn't it? Nothing against Atlanta, but it's kind of a buzzkill, isn't it?
No, because it was a buzzkill last night when you're in South Florida. You know, palm trees, sunshine,
South
warm
Florida
weather.
to South Bend.
Kickoff weather at Hard Rock Stadium was a balmy 57 degrees. I think they changed it. I think it said 58 on the video board. They announced it as 57, and then later in the press box they said we want to make a correction. Actually, kickoff temperature was 56. So it was not Florida as we know Florida to be in the entire time that Notre Dame was there. But again, look at the run that they've been on since the end of the end of the regular season. They've been to New York, Los Angeles, New Orleans, Miami, and now they're going to Atlanta, which is a relatively quick flight from South Bend. So I think they'll take that right now. And also, it's not a buzzkill because let's remember, guys, they've played and they won in that stadium back in October.
And
so
Atlanta's a cool city. It doesn't offer the extracurriculars that the other two cities do. You know what I mean?
It doesn't, but they're also not going to walk into Mercedes-Benz Stadium and be like, "Wow, look at this place! This place is unbelievable."
Right.
They're going to say, "Hey, we've already done this. Let's do it again and go win a national title."
Tom, here's the buzzkill for you. The buzzkill means because the Irish won, you are now obligated to join us one more week.
Yes.
Maybe even two.
Friday. Next Friday, I know Friday's a travel day, so I'm the 12:30 slot, maybe pushing it.
All right, well, we'll get Eddie in touch with your people, and we'll see where we can't wedge you in, and then be sure to slide you like a Illuminati's gift card for the effort.
And I'll stay on the line so you can get my
That's right, Tom.
For the check to clear.
That's right. I appreciate it, and just remember when you walk out of the door in South Bend and it's -5 that you were complaining about 56 degrees. Appreciate it, Tom.
I wasn't. You got it, brother. Yeah.
Tom Noy joining us, South Bend Tribune. All right, we come back. I had a question that was asked to me last night about Notre Dame that I thought was a darn good one, and I'll ask Jimmy about that, and we'll get back into the Colts conversation as well. scoreboard ourselves to make sure that we're keeping on task of what we were going to talk about, right?
My thoughts.
Yeah, I'm glad that we got that. I was thinking about leaving, but now that I know the show's still going on,
Right.
I'm good.
It runs till 3. Now, I'm not saying the fun began at noon, but the show did, right?
Indeed.
So I'm embarrassed.
And nervous and fidgety.
I like to think of myself as a guy that is like I try to know as much about Indiana as possible. Like I'm down with William Henry Harrison trivia. I'm down with knowing about the Battle of Tecumseh. I'm down with knowing about Corydon being the first state capital. I'm down with knowing what the only county is that was the last one to get a 4-way stop sign. All those things, right? I used to know, I could tell exactly where Jimmy, this is how you know I'm older than you. I used to be able to tell when I was behind a car, even if I was driving in the depths of Georgia, if I was behind a car with an Indiana license plate, I knew what county they were from. Oh, look at that guy. He's from Carmel. How do you know? His license plate's got a 29. Oh, look there. My man's from Bloomington. How do you know? 53, baby. 55 is Martinsville. 82, Evansville. 79, Tippecanoe County. Knew it all, right?
A lot of restraining orders handed out during that
That's
time.
right. Oh, he's from Fort Wayne. How do you know? He's got a 2 on his plate. That's how you know those things about Indiana if you're a certain age. I was asked a question last night, and I thought I knew the answer. And then I thought, that's actually a really good question. So I'm at dinner with the Australians. They have the game on. And Marcus asks me, so why are they the Fighting Irish? And I said, well, and then I thought, wait a minute. My assumption is because it is a Catholic school, an Irish Catholic. But then again, I'm like, well, Catholicism, though, is, there's Roman Catholic also. I mean, I'm not Catholic, so I can't speak to, and I don't mean that flippantly. I mean, I'm being totally honest. Do you know the origin of Fighting Irish?
As I remember it, and I'm going back in the Wayback Machine here, I know it was Newt Rockne-centric in terms of the way the phrase was coined. I had always remember it as it being because at the time, Fighting Irish itself was a stereotype towards Irish Catholics as being drunks and being like too aggressive and starting barroom brawls and all that. And I always thought it was a nickname for the underdog mentality of those Irish teams that Rockne led, while also taking a phrase that was used in a negative connotation and spinning it as a positive for the university and for all those that identify with Notre Dame and the Irish heritage there.
I would not have known this had I not looked it up, but it's actually because 4 of the 6 founding members of Notre Dame, the University of Notre Dame, were in fact Irish, but they wanted to pay homage to Irish immigrant soldiers who had fought for the Union during the Civil War, during the Irish Brigade. And 3 of those regiments had come from New York, and at one point, Notre Dame had a big game at Fenway in Boston, and they wanted to show the New York representation and thus adopted that mantra as the Fighting Irish. I never would have known that. I found it interesting, though, for what it's worth.
They do reference, as I've gone back and looked for it a little bit.
Columbus, Indiana was 3 on the plates, by the way.
Really? Mm-hmm. They do reference Newt Rockne as well, and that part of it is true, too. But there's the reason the name stuck as well, there was a heavy Klan presence at one point in time, both in Indiana and South Bend, and like kind of students and anti-Klan activists, rioted and rebelled them out of the city. So there were a lot of different nuggets that helped make that name stick. It wasn't initially fully beloved and accepted at the time, but yeah, it's a crazy history for how the name came about, what it represents, and then why it has stood the test of time for Notre Dame.
49 was Marion County, but because of the fact that there were more numbers that were needed because there were only so many combos that could start with 49, 99 was also Marion County, for what it's worth. Yeah. I'm telling you,
what camp did you like to be in if you were getting a Marion County play?
Very good question. 49 meant you were kind of, I think 97 also was Marion. So 49, 97, 99. If you had a 49 though, you were old school, right? Like you were that was the
one of the OGs of the
OGs. Yes. It's kind of like if you live in New York and you want the 212 area code.
Oh yeah, or
like now you don't want the 765, right?
Right. Yeah.
Isn't there a new one?
There was. I remember when that happened. 5-10 years ago when they split the zip code or split the area code here in Indy, and so 317. Some people don't have that now.
You know what I always thought? So you know how people say like I'm from the 317.
Sure.
I've always wanted to say I'm from the 482.
Okay.
Would you like to guess why?
Why? I don't. That doesn't do much for me, regrettably.
Think about it, and I'll tell you the answer before Dave Revson joins us,
Okay.
which he's going to do next. Okay, I mentioned to you that typically people say they're from the 317, and I think I threw out the wrong number to you, Jimmy. Sorry, I was sitting there looking at the clock knowing Dave Revson was coming on. It threw me off.
I forgive you.
782 is what I would say. I'm from the 782.
Okay.
Now, can you guess the significance of the 782?
Based on my not guess, research-based idea, I would say you've been longing to go to Nova Scotia.
Excellent guess. Hold on to the thought. Well, I'll tell you after we get
Okay.
Dave Revson in. Dave Revson joins us now in the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so based off coming off that cliffhanger. Dave, we were going to talk a little college basketball with you, but let's begin with college football because Ohio State's still carrying the flag for the conference, and I think has clearly the best chance to win the national title. I think when they're playing their game, they're the best team. But let's go back to last night with Penn State. I thought personally, and I think Notre Dame's tremendous. Penn State in that game last night, Dave, I don't know that you could look at that and say that you're overly disappointed by Penn State's performance. That was just a great game between two pretty balanced teams, and Notre Dame made a play in the end. But overall, your assessment of the Big Ten representation.
I generally agree with you, Jake. I guess I just look at it from the point of view. I mean, obviously, I see everything through the lens of the Big Ten just because I've been doing this for 18 years at the Big Ten Network, and before that, grew up as a Big Ten fan. So kind of my entire lifetime has really been largely seen through that lens. And this was just such a missed opportunity for Penn State. Like, I agree with you. I think Notre Dame's good. They made one or two more plays than Penn State did. But Penn State, I mean, it has been this quest to get back to where they were. I mean, they haven't won a national championship since the 1980s. They were the team that would have been in the 12-team playoff the most times during the 14 playoff era that didn't make the 14 playoff, if that makes sense, right? Like, this 12-team playoff was basically built for them. Expansion was built for them. And I understand they won a couple games, but they kind of end up in that same spot, which is they face a top 5 team and they just don't win those games. I mean, they're 1-25 now against top 5 teams this century. And you think about how great a program this has been through the years and just what an opportunity that was. I mean, I think Notre Dame is a really, really good team. I think Penn State's every bit as good. And it felt like early in the game they were owning the line of scrimmage, and it felt to me like they were at least early on, they looked to be the better team. But again, like you said, give credit to Notre Dame. I think they're really, really good too. I think Mark has done an amazing job, a guy I like quite a bit. Certainly have known him from his time in coaching in the Big Ten. And, I mean, it just came down to ultimately, I think it's really hard to win a game in this day and age in college football if you don't complete a single pass to a wide receiver. And that was the story with Penn State last night. I mean, literally 0 catches for wide receivers. And that's just a tough way to roll.
Dave, one thing I flippantly said last night was for the last kind of what you're talking about, like in the last, let's say, 20 years where Penn State has really been trying to get back to that spot, as you mentioned, each game that I've seen where Penn State is a top 10 in a top 10 matchup going up against, whether it be against Ohio State or whatever, it always feels to me like the movie Full Metal Jacket. Like the first half, it's great, right? You're totally engaged, and then like it gets really dark, and then things all of a sudden just you're like, this is a totally different movie than what I saw in the first half of the movie. And for whatever reason, more than any other program, Penn State kind of feels that way to me. What is it that's missing where they just can't get over that proverbial hump, as elementary as that sounds?
Well, I mean, I think it's been overly simplistic, but I guess I would just kind of blame the offense. Like, I just feel like they haven't really had the kind of dynamic passing game that, let's say, for instance, Ohio State has in really, during the CFP era. I think they've had good quarterbacks. They haven't been great. Drew Aller is certainly an NFL caliber talent, and I think anyone who watches him throw, like when we go to preseason practice and you watch him throw, he's really good. Again, I don't think all of this is on him. I go back to what I said a moment ago. Like, you have to have someone who can take the top off a defense, someone who threatens a D, and you knew what you were getting with Notre Dame. I mean, they are a man coverage team. If you have somebody who can just win a one-on-one battle, I just think that loosens things up and would have made things easier for Warren and Singleton. But they still, they went over 200 yards rushing. So, to me, it's offense, and they tried to address it this year. I think Andy Kotelnicki did a really nice job with what he had. I mean, the way that he utilized Tyler Warren was fabulous. He had 2 really good backs. But I just think, again, in this day and age, you need to be able to get big chunk plays through the air, and Penn State just can't do that. So that, to me, is what it is. Have they stuck with the quarterbacks too long? I mean, I think you see the churn at Ohio State where they're, hey, maybe we have a good guy. I mean, as evidenced by what we're going to see tonight, Quinn Ewers really good, but wasn't quite good enough to unseat C.J. Stroud, and so he leaves, and you don't panic, and you kind of move on, and so I think Ohio State, and part of it is success breeds success, and so if you've had quarterbacks who are coming in and succeeding and getting picked towards the top of the draft and all of that, it helps you in recruiting the next guy. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know, but to me, that's kind of the missing element is for whatever reason, they just haven't been as dynamic in the past game as the great teams in college football have been in this era.
Dave Repson of the Big Ten Network is our guest. He joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Dave, switching towards Ohio State, what the Buckeyes have done in this playoff run makes the game against Michigan all the more confusing to me. You can correct me if I'm wrong on this as I rant for just a second. I felt like Michigan baited them into a rock fight. No, I can lift more than you. No, I can lift more than you type of game. And they're better built to be the free-flowing, explosive, down-the-field offense that they've shown throughout this playoff. My long-winded way of asking, whether it's Texas or Notre Dame in the final, is Ohio State capable of being baited into that style of play again? Or if they are now turned this corner, it's just going to be this explosive gangbuster-style offense that Chip Kelly has kind of unlocked during this run?
Man, I hope it's the latter, Jimmy. I do think the Michigan game plan, particularly if they go on to win the national championship, will go down as one of the oddest game plans that I can remember in college football. And look, all of these guys have forgotten more about football than I will ever know. And I do think it's dangerous for someone like me to sit there and say, what in the world were they doing? But what in the world were they doing? I mean, Michigan is good at one thing defensively, and that is stopping the run. I mean, they have first-round draft picks on that defensive line. I mean, probably 3 of them. And so it was really, really odd. You know, there is a stat out there, and it's something like 23 years in a row or whatever it is. I can't remember the exact number, but the team that's run it for more yards has won the Michigan-Ohio State game. Again, it's not like that's passed down from on high. That's like how you have to win the game. It's just how teams have won the game because generally that's the way that these teams are built. I just feel like Ohio State is so dynamic in the pass game. They're so talented there. And it is weird. You know, part of it obviously was the offensive line hasn't been great. And it has been these last 2 games, but it wasn't for part of the year. They were dealing with injuries. I think maybe there was a fear that they couldn't protect. And that was part of it. I don't know. I mean, it was a really, really odd game plan. They have been very different here in these first 2 CFP games. I mean, the number that they did on Oregon, I think, was just shocking, frankly. I mean, not just to beat them, but to pummel them in the way that they did, that it was 34-0 before Oregon ever ran a play in Ohio State territory. Like, that's just unheard of against the number 1 team in the country. So I hope that what we see tonight will be more along the lines of what we saw against Tennessee and against Oregon rather than what we saw against Michigan, where you throw the ball to set up the run. It certainly makes sense with the personnel that they have. And maybe that Michigan game just goes down as one of the strangest blips that we can recall, because I do think Ohio State's the best team left in this thing, but you know, 1-game scenario, Texas is certainly very capable and fascinating to see what happens tonight.
Dave, you have not been to – Dave Repson, Big Ten Network, is our guest. You've not been to the Indy 500, correct?
I've never been to the Indy 500. I've been to the Little 500.
Well, that's cool. I mean, that's not bad, right? You've seen Breaking Away. That's cool, right?
I'm trying to get some Indiana credibility, but no, I've never been to the Indy 500.
That's enough for me. I like the Little 500 reference. Good for
here's the thing, Dave.
Yeah, one of my college roommates got thrown in jail there, but that's another thing.
Of course, right? Now, here's the thing. So typically, you know, with the philanthropic nature by which I live, I offer friends and family one of 2 experiences. One is the chance to be with me at the Indy 500. The other is to get a koozie with my name on it. Unfortunately, you have exhausted your chance here, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, but the koozie is, as you know, a family heirloom. We had it on the mantelpiece for years, and Michelle finally said, let's put this in the safe deposit
That's
box.
right. It's an heirloom now, right? Let's be real.
Yeah.
It's in the will.
So, Dave, here's my point, though. At the Indy 500, whenever there's a rain delay and the track starts to get moisture on it, they bring out safety vehicles, like big pickup trucks with flashing lights on them that do a couple of laps to try to dry the track off, right?
Okay.
It felt like Chip Kelly literally had access to 3 different Roger Penske Indy 500 front row machines and instead decided to run the Indy 500 with a pickup truck against Michigan. It was totally befuddling to me because you saw against Oregon what they're able to do. I mean, this may be to me, and you tell me if you disagree with this, Ohio State's receiving core and their ability to spread the field and create and then take advantage of space, I think is as good as any we've seen in college football the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, they're fabulous. I mean, but I would say I hesitate to throw all this at the feet of Chip Kelly. I think this was Ryan Day's game plan, too. I mean, if you listen to Ryan in that postgame, he was citing that stat about the team that runs the ball better wins this game. I just think for whatever reason, they have this fixation in their head. And it's not dissimilar from the deal last year in the Notre Dame game, that kind of where's Lou Holtz right now, and this discussion about toughness. I think for whatever reason, there is this belief that, like, to win at the highest level, in Ryan's head, to win at the highest level, you need to be the tougher team and win the line of scrimmage. And I do think there's a lot to that. And I'm not in any way minimizing it. Again, I have the utmost respect. I think the world of Ryan Day, both as a football coach and as a person. I think he's fabulous. But I think for whatever reason, there might be like some sort of fixation on that. So I don't want to just say this was Chip Kelly. So, but to your broader point, yes, like this, again, is Will Howard a great quarterback? Like, no, I don't think he's a great quarterback, but we have seen him be really, really good here in recent games. I mean, he's been fabulous during the CFP. The guy threw for over 200 yards in the first quarter against Oregon. But again, that's just a byproduct of look at the guys that you have at your disposal. I mean, Jeremiah Smith, you talk to NFL people, like, you know, he'd be like a top 10 now.
Right,
like
no question.
Right now.
No question.
And he's got to play 2 more years of college football. And then Emeka Egbuka obviously is an all-time great. I mean, with a really good game, he could end up as the all-time leading receiver at Ohio State. And you think about all the great receivers they've had. So, yeah, I mean, this is just an incredible 1-2 punch. And, I am very hopeful that is the strategy that they deploy tonight, because I think if they do, you know, you just can't make mistakes against Texas. So if they deploy that strategy and take care of the football against a team that is the second most interceptions in the country, I think they'll be in really good shape.
All right, Dave, before we let you go, let's cover basketball real quick. You know, both Indiana and Purdue, obviously the Hoosiers at 4-1 in conference play, so too Purdue. I'll stick with Purdue. I thought Matt Painter used the first quarter of the non-conference schedule to really kind of figure out and mesh how to play now without Zach Edey. I think Trey Kaufman-Renn is a really good player, but they've done a really nice job of finding auxiliary pieces to kind of spread the floor around a little bit and find a little more balance. Your thoughts on where Purdue is and Indiana, I guess, and just where they slot in your feeling in the Big Ten?
Well, let's start with Purdue. I had their game against Northwestern on Sunday, and I was blown away by how they played on defense. And then they followed it up last night against Rutgers, and it was a similar deal where each one of those teams has 2 guys who can beat you. Northwestern, it's Barnhizer and Martinelli. Obviously, it's the 2 freshmen with Rutgers, and they just shut them down. Really fabulous game plans both times. And I kind of went into that Northwestern game thinking that Purdue was figuring it out on offense, but wasn't quite at the level defensively that you had seen them at in previous years. And we were talking, Robbie Hummel was on last night, Robbie and Andy and I were talking after the Purdue game. And, you know, part of that is you had 7-4 back there protecting the rim, and they expected to have Daniel Jacobson this year. And then he got hurt in that second game. And Matt was saying, you know, that really was their rim protector. And so not having him, it's taken them a while to figure out how to best play defensively. And I think the adjustments that they've made in the lineup these last couple games of starting C.J. Cox is a really good defender, the freshman, and then putting Caleb First in the lineup as well, I think that's helped them on the defensive end. So I think they figured something out. They're obviously an elite offensive team still. Braden Smith just better and better. He just controls the game. The best point guards, like the game comes to them, and that's the thing that stands out to me watching him. So I think the arrow's really pointing up on Purdue. I think they're one of the better teams in the Big Ten. Indiana is interesting to me. I mean, if you believe in the advanced metrics, Bart Torvik's side, I think is really good. They've played the easiest conference schedule in the league so far. They are 4-1, and I don't want to in any way discredit that. I think that win against Penn State at the Palestra is a really good win. Like, Penn State is a disruptive team.
But, Dave, they need more of those because they don't have any really good wins going into it. You know what I mean?
No, I think like that's a legitimate win. That's their best win of the year, and honestly, I don't think it's that close. Like just kind of thinking back off the top of my head, I don't think there's anything else that really stands out as a win that in any way would move the selection committee. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a good start. I think to do it without Malik Reneau is impressive. Although it's interesting that. Again, it's weird. You never want to say, like, he's a great player, and Malik Reneau is someone who can really, really help you. But I do think it spread the floor a little bit. And, like, if Luke Goody keeps shooting the ball the way that he has, I mean, they're a little bit tougher to defend than they are maybe with that too big lineup with Reneau and Ballo. So, and then for whatever happened in the Winthrop game where Umar Ballo didn't play, right? Like whatever happened there, that message has been received. I mean, he's just been dramatically better here in these last couple of games. So again, I don't know that we'll know what that was all about, but Umar knows. He clearly knows, and it's given him kind of a kick in the pants in whatever way that it feels like Mike Woodson wanted to do that. So yeah, I'm not saying I don't think Indiana's good. I guess I'm just hesitant.
Yeah, we don't know yet, right? We truly don't know.
I don't think their 4-1 is as good as some other 4-1s, but I'm willing to allow for the possibility that they're really good because I think they have arguably the best roster in the Big Ten, or certainly in the top 2 or 3.
Very fair. Dave, appreciate it. I know you're busy, so I do certainly appreciate the time. It'll be Ohio State carrying the flag for the Big Ten tonight in college football, and then obviously full slate of college basketball games around the corner too after the Big Ten potentially claims itself a national championship, but Notre Dame stands in the way. Appreciate it, Dave. Happy New Year to you.
Okay, thanks, Shake. Thanks, Jimmy. Take care, guys.
Dave Revson joining us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. I want to get back into some of that Chris Ballard conversation from what we were talking about earlier today and kind of go back to just the timeline in which Chris Ballard said some things that I found interesting. The first is when we talk about free agency and assessing what's out there that can accentuate this roster. I think Ballard was open about the fact that he realized he was putting too much emphasis on the guys that are playing on this particular roster and might need to go out and find some guys elsewhere. But a couple of things where I found, I'm going to say some inconsistency, and let me point it out, and I'll have Chris Ballard talk here. First off, Chris Ballard talking about how the free agency approach maybe needs to be different this year than last.
Last year, we didn't completely abstain from free agency. And we've actually done things in the past. So I just think we have to be we have to do a better job identifying the free agents that we want to sign and then being able to close the deal on them. And that's up to me. It really is. It's not Mr. Irsay. He'll let me do what I need to do. And my staff. We have to be able to do that.
Okay, now, what's interesting is he says that, but then when talking about the vision of the offseason and the roster, had this to say.
We have not formulated a plan. But what I'm going to tell you is we're going to be open to making sure we do what is best going forward to build a competitive roster. I'm not going to sit here and say, all right, you want to say, okay, let's go hog wild in free agency, all right? And then if I don't do it, well, you're doing the same thing. No, I'm not going to pigeonhole myself there.
Okay, my point here is this, and where I'm a little bit confused, and those were not said within the same breath. But if you know you need to do better in free agency, I think you're hurting yourself if, in fact, you have not yet formulated a plan. It wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. And, again, I would hope and assume that the staff, the scouts, have a list of players that they would think if they came to them right now. Like, I would think that you would be able to stop in any NFL franchise, walking down the hall, stop somebody and just say, top 4 defensive backs in the NFL right now that could be available via free agency, boom, go. And they would be able to tell you, actually, this player, this player, this player, this player.
I'm going to chalk that up to what you outlined earlier, Jake, of how he's so good at being the rip the page off the calendar sports cliche guy that it confused his messaging. And I'm going to assume that was I'm keeping my cards close to the chest cliche answer. I refuse to believe that an acting general manager does not have a plan in place already for this free agency
Right.
class.
That's why when I heard we've not yet formulated a plan, I thought surely he spoke out of school there. But he did have this story about Alec Pierce, which I think is a lesson, not only for all of us, but for Chris Ballard. And I think, and it's unfortunate that it took this story from Alec Pierce perhaps to be an epiphany and illuminate for Chris Ballard. But when the Colts this year drafted A.D. Mitchell, and Alec Pierce was supposed to be the long ball guy for the Colts, and then all we heard about A.D. Mitchell was he has wiggle, he gets up the line, all of those things. Here's what happened between Alec Pierce and Chris Ballard when A.D. Mitchell was drafted.
After the draft, anytime you draft a player at a position, there's some uneasiness, and Alec felt it. He came to my office. He said, "Chris, what does this mean for me?" I said, "Nothing. Compete." And it's exactly what he did. He didn't bitch. He didn't complain. He didn't make excuses. He competed, and he is freaking good. He's exactly who we thought he was going to be. And
Okay. Here's the problem. You know what I'm about to say. The problem is the fact that Chris Ballard had one position, where he created competition. And he recognized and noticed right then that by creating competition, it made for a better player. Alec Pierce became a better player because it forced him, not that he wasn't beforehand, but it forced him to be the pros pro that didn't complain, that put his head down, went to work, and started producing and is really good. But that's the only position where he created that competition. Everywhere else, you went team run it back status quo and complacency set in. And that was part of what Chris Ballard talked about in his summary of just his overall thoughts of everything that went into today.
I think I've explained it here pretty clearly in terms of the roster and bringing everybody back, how that was a mistake. That created a complacency within, that there was almost that's what Buck was talking about. There was an entitlement that, you know what, I'm back, I deserve to be back, which, yes, you did. But there's also an expectation and a standard that you have to uphold. And, they get frustrated with me sometimes, but, when for much that's given, more is expected. That's the truth. And when you're on your second, third contract, damn right, there's more expected of you to lead, to perform, all that is real. And ultimately, what I've done is created an atmosphere that wasn't competitive enough. Wasn't. Of course, the coaches, they beat, but look, at the end of the day, the locker room have to drive this thing, man. Their competitive will and spirit has to help drive this thing. We can push it along, damn right. Hold the standards and hold them accountable. But those are the things I came up with. Those are real.
And so complacency, I think, Jimmy, hurt them and ultimately did them in.
It feels like he's saying the things everybody wants to hear him say today, and that there's not enough conviction behind real substance and change for the philosophy of the organization in entering year 9 for him. And he does at some point address the fact that he knows these are words and actions are going to be the ultimate buy-in from the fan base. They're going to have to see it to believe it, and that's their right, given the fact we're 9 seasons in with this show. What I have an issue with is there are moments in this press conference, and especially, Jake, if you were ripping off the pages of those press conference calendar cliches he's been reading off the last 4 years, if you've saved any of those and you start comparing them, year by year, it starts to seem like he's talking out of both sides of his mouth. And today where I saw it, he highlights the fact that and I'm paraphrasing, it probably wasn't a good idea to run it back last season, that he regrets running it back last season. You can only make a statement like that when you have been handed another life preserver with your career and your job. here in Indianapolis. That's not something you can comfortably get on a stage and say and admit that you've now seen the light, that it was probably a bad idea with hindsight armed in your back pocket to run everything back. The area where it feels like, though, he's talking out of both sides of his mouth is, well, it was probably a bad idea to run it back last year, but we're probably going to be a little more aggressive in free agency this season. There's no full commitment to reshaping what he does from a day-to-day operations philosophical standpoint. And that's been my biggest issue with all this, Jake, is if you're going to get from the whole fan base, I don't mean the people that are the diehards that clearly are being forgotten about by running this thing back again one more season. I'm talking about being in the lexicon of Indianapolis and mattering and have people caring about what you're building at West 56th. Chris Ballard is right about this part. Nobody's going to believe what you sold today about, yeah, we're going to be more aggressive and we need to look at free agency more thoroughly until you actually do it. Because saying now, today, when you know you have another year armed with yourself, oh, we're going to be more aggressive and we were wrong last year to run it back, that doesn't make anybody feel any better. It is the argument of hindsight and knowing everything of the disaster this season was and now trying to sell it like you've learned and you've grown. No, you've not. You got your hand caught in the cookie jar by mom and dad, a.k.a. Jim Irsay, and now you realize you have to spin this as, well, what we did probably wasn't a good idea, so maybe we'll look at spending a little more. Nobody's going to buy the empty promises until they actually act on it and spend sufficient money, not just stopgaps, not just for competition, making upgrades for the holes on this roster, especially on the defensive end for whatever defensive coordinator you bring into town.
There's a danger on being reliant on free agency, but they put themselves in position right now for it because they haven't created enough competition to make the players they organically acquired any better. Now, Jimmy, I told you, a lot of people would say, like, I'm from the 317, I'm from the 812, I'm from the 212, right? I'm from the LBC. So much drama in the LBC. I told you, if I ever had to do that, I would say I'm from the 782. I'm from the 782. I said earlier I said the number wrong, I think, because I was looking at something else. But I'm from the 782. You said that's Nova Scotia, right?
Yeah, it could also be Prince Edward Island if you're more towards that realm of Canada.
Not only is it not Prince Edward Island, not only did I never do the prank, do you have Prince Edward in the can? None of those things. Do you have a calculator in front of you?
I do indeed.
Could you please enter in 782? And could you please subtract 317?
Yes.
And what do you get?
465.
Bingo, baby. My area code and my bypass, right? Let's go. I'm from the 465, baby. 52.7 miles it used to be to take a lap, put on some Guns N' Roses, do it on a summer night when there's nobody on the road. Clear your head. That's what you do. By the way, we're not going to take a lap around 465, but we are, if you have, Jimmy, any sort of snacks in mind, brace yourself because the NFL playoffs are upon us. So what better thing to do than to bring back the 2-minute drill? We should stop by in
I checked a bag, though. Is that a problem?
Detroit. What's that?
I checked a bag. Is that okay? We got to go to the baggage claim now afterwards. Is that fine? I'm sorry. I didn't prepare today.
What kind of veteran are you? I got you the TSA pre, and now you're doing that?
I know. Yeah. Sorry.
Actually, you know what? Not Detroit. Let's go to Minnesota. Let's go to – should we go to Buffalo?
I'd like that. I hear it's nice this time of year.
Should we go to Houston?
Why not?
All right. Anywhere else you can think of?
Philly?
Okay. We could do that.
I like cheesesteaks.
City of brotherly love, right?
Let's go.
I do like
go
the
see the
cheesesteaks.
Liberty Bell.
The Aussies are going to Australia. From here, they're going to Philly. I told them they got to go get cheesesteaks, right? But they don't even need to fly to Philly from here because they can just stick around because we're about to go there on the 2-minute drill next. By the way, you heard J&V mention the volleyball match tomorrow night. I'm excited about this up in Fishers. I think Kevin's going to go there. Kevin Bowen going to join us about 10 minutes from now. Shannon and I will be in attendance. This is at the new event center in Fishers, so perfect night to go out and enjoy. I mean, there's so much. That area is unbelievable now at the Fishers Event Center up there off of like between, 106th and 116th. But tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, so this is a new professional volleyball team, the Indy Ignite, that have come to Indianapolis, and we have a pair of courtside. I'm not talking, look, we go all out here, right? If you want to go, and it will be electronically sent to you, the tickets will, so you don't have to come down to the station to pick them up. If you would like to go tomorrow night to see the Indy Ignite and experience the Fishers Event Center for courtside seats. Now, nobody is going to be excited because they would theoretically get to meet me. And
it's a thrill, let me tell you. So if you're not excited about that.
A slightly larger margin will be excited to meet Kevin. But you get to meet Shannon, right?
That's enough in and of itself.
So, you know.
At least that's what John tells me.
Now, I don't know if she'll be wearing the knee brace or not. She was very mobile last night. I'll give her credit for that.
They give her a prognosis on how long she has to keep
We went to dinner, and she was able
brace?
to move around. So that was good.
She have a prognosis on the brace? How long she got to keep that on, in theory?
I think she avoided major damage, so I don't think very long.
That's good.
It's more for stability.
Yeah.
239-1070 is the telephone number. 239. Now, Jimmy, you give me a number 1 through, let's say, 5.
3.
3. Caller number 3 in just a minute when I give you the cue to call, to use a radio term, at 239-1070, you will win the 2 tickets. I think it'll be a fun event tomorrow night. It'll be a fun night out in Fishers. Now, don't call just yet. 239-1070. Speaking of 3, that is pretty much the number of players that the Golden State Warriors are going to be without tonight. Their laundry list of players, keep in mind they're coming off a back-to-back as Golden State is. They will be without Steph Curry. They will be without Draymond Green. They will be without Jonathan Kuminga. They will be without Andrew Wiggins. They will be without Gary Payton II. Trace Jackson Davis is listed as questionable. So I know that people get excited to see some of those big players for Golden State, but you're not going to be able to see them, at least from a playing standpoint, at Gainbridge Fieldhouse tonight. Good news is you will see, obviously, the Pacers and hopefully continuing the level of play that they've been playing.
Silver lining as well. If you fell in love with this player when he was here like I did, I believe it's trending towards you're going to get to see Buddy Hield.
Oh, man, Buddy Hield's going to be like watching Papa Shot, right?
Yeah.
Buddy Hield's going to be
his numbers are insane,
fly.
By the way. Like they had an article on Pacers.com today just kind of going through the game preview. To have 505 threes with the Pacers in 158 games, I don't care how crazy the league is now with shooting from beyond the arc. That's mind-boggling.
A rhythm shooter and a quick release shooter, right? And I think a guy that was really well liked by his team. I mean, Buddy Hield, though, not to relive that, but when Buddy Hield's contract was coming up, he basically had made it known that he wanted to go into free agency, so they kind of had to flip it for what they could, right?
Yeah.
And get what they could out of it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any real ill will there. I hope the fan base doesn't, but I think
I think people like him, right?
Yeah, I think the Pacers were just honoring a situation, knowing, hey, we need to get something here, but also it's clear he wants what he wants, and let's make the most out of the situation. I think it was a very amicable split.
Also, by the way, in the world of racing, Romain Grosjean, who has become a popular driver within the IndyCar series. Of course, he was most known for being involved in a horrific crash in Formula One and the fire that was kind of made him a household name because of Drive to Survive. Romain Grosjean announced now will be a reserve driver for the new Prima team over the course of the 25 season. It would not surprise me if that parlays itself into, in fact, an entry for him in the Indianapolis 500. All right, 239-1070. Have you ever watched high-level volleyball, Jimmy?
I have, yes.
Tennis and volleyball are two sports that when you watch it at a high level down low, it's pretty awesome. Pretty fun to watch, right?
Yeah, when it's moving the way it's supposed to, it's an incredible high-octane sport. It's always good to get to check in whenever the NCAA Final Four and National Championships are underway, too.
All right, so caller number 3 is what Jimmy said at 239-1070. You will be on your way tomorrow night. You will get tickets electronically sent to you for the Indy Ignite at the Fishers Event Center. When you are there, you'll get the chance to see Kevin J&V will be there as well until he does the J&V takeover. Kevin and I will be there for the game. Shannon will be there as well. Need dependent, I guess. And somebody will be there with us. So if you are able to attend and you want the tickets, give us a call right now. If you're calling number 3 at 239-1070, Kevin Bowen going to join us other side. Probably was celebrating into the wee hours Notre Dame's win last night, but had to turn around and get on it quickly because not only did he have the morning show this morning, the wake-up call with KB and Andy, but had to get to the Chris Ballard press conference, and we will begin with exactly that. Kevin joins us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line. Kevin, Jimmy and I kind of went over our impressions, our reactions to some of the things that Chris Ballard had to say. I guess I will begin by asking you this. You have been through now, 8 of these? 7 in terms of a postseason wrap-up from Chris Ballard. This one, in terms of tone or messaging, was different how?
There were definitely a lot of similarities, but I would say the differences became in his overall messaging around free agency. Sounds like much more of a, run it back was a mistake, and I need to be more willing to identify free agents that fit us, and then when it's time to go ahead and pursue, get the ball across the goal line, to use the football analogy, and not, we're the runner-up for Daniil Hunter, kind of things like that. So I would say that was probably the biggest difference. Again, he's been so uber reliant on the locker room and, really this core ever since about 2021. I mean, this has largely been the core. Certainly the quarterbacks have changed, but so many of the captains have not. And I think it was kind of an admittance of that was probably too cushy. So that was probably the biggest thing that he said today that I thought was, mostly a 180 in messaging from how he typically talks.
Kevin, do you think when you highlight him mentioning the hindsight comments of, we shouldn't have run everybody back, or I need to be different in free agency, do you think he's just saying what people and what maybe ownership wants to hear? Or did you take it as the tone of somebody that realizes, man, if I want to be in a happier tone and have this job still next year, I'm going to have to change some things?
Yeah, I mean, obviously actions are going to ultimately speak louder than words, but, you would like to think that he means it. I mean, it's not like he's got results to point towards and say, no, look at what we did here and here. Like, he doesn't really have that. So, I mean, the only thing he has is his stubborn attitude. And those are his words, really. I mean, I would call him stubborn, and he called himself stubborn on several occasions. So, was this mandated from Jim Irsay? Basically all he would say was Irsay said, fix it. I think it's probably reached a point where it's got to be bothersome to him, how this has looked and how players have talked about the locker room and how ex-players have talked about the locker room. I think all of that stuff would really rub him the wrong way. So, again, your proof comes in action over time. I think he had that exact phrase. So for January 10th, those words in regards to free agency. And I thought his draft stuff was largely the same. I didn't think his defensive messaging, and I'm talking about the actual defensive side of the football, we got to be more aggressive in affecting the quarterback. But, I didn't hear maybe a substantial, philosophical change there. So there's some other things that I thought were similar. And sure, there's just a general falling on the sword that he has done quite often. But I thought specifically closing the deal on free agents, running it back was wrong, way too much complacency. He had a quote late in the presser that I found kind of interesting, and that basically said some of these late season losses, we don't have enough tough guys. And I think when you think about big compliments in the game of football, describing a player as tough is a very, very high compliment. I think right now that, Jimmy, you and I can speak to it as a fan of Notre Dame. A lot of people call Notre Dame a really tough football team, and I think it's accurate, sure, but I also think it's a really high compliment. And so for Ballard to say publicly, I don't feel like we have enough of those guys, and I need to go out and get more of those guys, again, that's an admittance that I certainly haven't heard in the past 8 years.
Deep down, Kevin Bowen, our guest, do you think Chris Ballard expected to be here? And you could take that one of two ways. When I say expected to be here, you could say, is he surprised that he's getting another crack at it? Or you could say, is he surprised that they're in the state that they're in? You can answer both.
Well, I asked him if he was surprised to get in the 9th year, and he basically would just say, hey, I'm grateful and I'm humbled, to have this opportunity. Do
you think he is humbled?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd like to think there's a level of humility that has to be there. I don't want to act like he's scrolling Twitter 24/7, but he also is not numb to the outside noise. He's very public in his own community, and his kids are still there. Obviously some are in college, but I said earlier in the week, I feel like the villain status towards the fan base, from the fan base towards him, has reached peak levels above Carson Wentz and Ryan Grigson. So, again, when you don't have the results and he listed out some of the lack of results. I mean, some of the resume stuff of no division titles and 4 straight years without a playoff appearance. I would add that's the longest drought in 30 years for the franchise. So, how do you ignore that? How are you not humbled? I mean, digging your grave even deeper to be stubborn in that sense would be quite the amount of just stubborn nature. So, again, I think there is some of it. But, having said that, you can play the counter game if you want to. I mean, the counter game of this time last year was, you know what, blame me for Gus Bradley's defensive issues. I didn't give him enough. Well, today he uttered the same phrase, and he didn't give Gus anything last year outside of Latu. Nothing in the secondary, nothing really at linebacker. So, you can point to instances of that where is this going to be continued stubbornness, or was like last year the final straw?
Kevin Bowen is our guest. You hear him on the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy, 7 to 10 a.m. on these very airwaves. Find his Colts coverage on 1075thefan.com. He's with us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Kevin, where I found myself getting the most frustrated during the show today, as we were playing back clips from, the re-listen live when it happened, there were moments when he talked about Anthony Richardson and two things that he presented like he was a victim in these following situations. With the argument of hindsight, he stressed the fact that they probably should have, in a perfect world, sat Anthony Richardson out of the gate and let him learn. And he also highlighted that when Richardson was benched, I believe the phrase he used was, "I wish the pause could have been longer." You are the general manager in the richest sport in the world, where people would kill to be able to make those kind of decisions because you have at least a portion of the power in a prestigious franchise. How can he try to frame it like, man, I wish that could have happened, where I look at it and I say, Chris, if you believe that he needed a longer pause this season, or if you believe that he should have sat right out of the gate, and you've pretty good patience from your ownership, why would you not demand that happen? That to me was more frustrating than anything, where he's acting like he didn't have a voice in these decisions.
Yeah, I don't know if I read it as that per se. I think as far as the first point in not playing Richardson, year one, I think he now looks at that as hindsight of just like, I wish I would have done that. Like, I don't think he thought to himself in September or August of 2023, like, oh, I don't think Richardson should play. No. I think then he still thought he should have played. He wishes, for whatever reason, he would have had better intel then that Richardson shouldn't have played. And then this year, I took I wish the pause would have been longer, as he wishes Flacco wouldn't have been so terrible during those two games. Again, I could be misreading it, but that's how I.
Am I crazy? I'm sorry to cut across you. Am I crazy to think that if this whole year was about the betterment of your quarterback, and you believe in hindsight, man, I wish the pause would have been longer, in theory, to help him take a breath and regather himself, him being Anthony Richardson, couldn't you present that to ownership and say, listen, I know Flacco's terrible, but this is what is best for AR? Like, isn't that the way you go about it, instead of acquiescing to this idea that, well, man, Flacco's so bad, we just don't have any other choice? That's the part that confuses me. Whether or not he operates with regret or hindsight can be debated, but the fact that if you felt like that was better for his long-term journey, why you wouldn't say, hey, I know Flacco's bad, but this is how it's got to be. I don't understand that.
Well, I just think it's the awkward nature of the franchise. Are you trying to develop Anthony Richardson, or are you trying to win games? And that's where probably Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen at times, would answer that differently. And, when you benched, I guess, Flacco, at that point in time, you were still very much in a playoff type of push. I mean, certainly you would have, needed to, upset Detroit, or I guess technically you would have had to upset Denver. But, you obviously still had a position at that point where you could get in the postseason. And again, they're just in a very awkward state of a 9th year or an 8th year GM at the time and a 2nd year head coach. I thought just just the most egregious whatever statement that he made today is it shouldn't take 8 years for you to realize, oh, wow, run it back makes the most sense. Like that general thought of there shouldn't be this epiphany after 8 years that, oh, yeah, this is a core that, whatever, 2020, 21, that was a blip, or 2021, that was a blip, 2022, that was a blip, 2023, that was a blip. You've had multiple years of evidence. And, again, the addition of 1 or 2 players, I don't think that's going to overwhelmingly, one way or the other, seriously shift things to, this locker room can't be touched and it's, holier than thou and all of that. I just have never viewed it in that light there. So I would say that kind of admittance today of, again, you appreciate his candor. I largely think he's more transparent than a lot of GMs around the league in these settings, but the message is still the message and the resume is still the resume. And the fact that, you're sitting up there today saying that, yeah, boy, I'm really, now looking back on it, running back and the lack of competition and not enough edginess. Again, those should kind of be core traits for a GM. Like annually, you should be sitting there and saying, how do we create competition to the nth degree and how to create more edginess to where we feel like it's at a point where highly competitive, wired athletes feel that and don't live in a place of contentment.
Kevin, I thought one of the more telling things was when he said, and we played it, but when it came to free agency, he said, we really haven't formulated a plan. Now, that took me by surprise because, and I realized 2 things. I realized maybe he's meaning it in a much more elementary scale than the way I took it. But I was under the assumption, if you go into San Francisco or New Orleans, you name the franchise, I would think that every team in the NFL right now already has a board with the 100 top free agents that are available and the ones that would work for them, wouldn't work for them, whatever, and already have a target. And it sounded to me like he was insinuating they're preparing to sit down at the table and start getting into that kind of thing. And I thought, that feels like 11th hour stuff. Now, was that me totally misunderstanding?
Yeah, you got 2 months till free agency. You don't even know who your defensive coordinator is. You don't know what personnel necessarily you want on that side of the ball. You're still doing exit meetings with players. We'll see if there's offensive staff changes. Doesn't sound like there will be, but yeah, I don't. That answer I didn't fret too much over. I thought specifically he was asked does that mean you're going to go out and find 2 and 3 and 4 starters? I feel like that was the phrasing of the question. And I just think once, and you've been in this position, Jake, once your language and asking questions gets into specifics that, a person in that position doesn't want to sniff, I think that then they can kind of clam up.
Correct.
And I think that's why he kind of clammed up with that answer.
It sounded like one that he either wasn't expecting to come or he had not thought about the fact that it might. You know what I mean? Yeah. Same thing, I guess. But
yeah, and I just think, those conversations I think really will heat up again. When you think about even re-signings, guys you've wanted to bring back, I can't imagine they've re-signed maybe 1 or 2 players in their history under Ballard before March. It's not like they're a big February re-sign team, and really very few teams are in the league. So, again, free agency's 2 months away. That one didn't bother me too much.
Now, here's the other thing, Kevin, that I thought about. Do you believe, and this is going to sound like I'm again, maybe this is too much, I don't know. Do you think Jim Irsay's still at the same level that he always has from day one, believes in Chris Ballard, or has Jim Irsay had enough on his plate in the last year that he just hasn't had the time and energy to address and assess all that goes into making that change?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very fair question. I would argue his 2024 either public appearances or overall messaging has been the quietest that I can recall. So when you factor in those things, I don't, and if you ask me to, you have to give an answer, I would say yes, it has to have some impact. Now, how much is just in general, he wants to, he wants to be right. I mean, I think that is probably something that's at play here as well. But yeah, I mean, the taxing nature to running a search, in some of these searches, are there times where you have to go to that person? I don't think we saw Jim Irsay at a road game all year. Are those specifics in there? So again, I think it's largely he's been obsessed with Chris Ballard since day one. He has had a delusion in what the resume has looked like, and he wants to stick by that and be right. And he's willing to give it a ninth year. I'm sure there's a little bit of financial impact, in the sense that he's under contract through 2026. So I think all those factors, including his own physical health, probably have some say in it, whether he wants to admit it or not.
If Joe Flacco was a guy that they didn't feel like they were surprised, and I know that he said today that he thought Flacco played well, but the end of the year, for example, you got a meaningless game. Anthony Richardson can't play, and a year ago the owner was insistent on seeing Sam Ehlinger. If they didn't see enough out of Sam Ehlinger to even give him a second look at any point this season, why is he on the roster?
Are you saying, was there any question specifically about Ehlinger?
Well, just in general, like what exactly? I mean, nothing against him personally,
right?
But what's the purpose there? Why was that not utilized into a player that perhaps is somebody that could more push Richardson? And what is his? Is that an opportunity? Is that an availability there? And I realize, Jake, you're asking about the third-string quarterback, but it's the third-string quarterback that we have seen by precedent the owner pushing for at one point.
Yeah, I think largely kind of goes back to my answer with Jimmy a few minutes ago of they're just in this weird state of a franchise of you get embarrassed in New York. Again, going to the New York game, you still were alive in the playoffs. So I totally got starting Flacco. Then you get embarrassed like no other. Now it's week 18. People are calling for your jobs or questioning your jobs. Are you really going to go to Ehlinger, or are you going to try and win the game to Flacco? Well, they won the game with Flacco, and look how Jim Irsay responded in the postgame locker room. Clearly it meant a lot to Irsay. I mean, right or wrong, I would disagree with the tone that Jim Irsay had in that postgame locker room.
Were you surprised the Colts released that video of the owner essentially congratulating them and being proud of an 8-9 record?
Not really. I there's probably an element of hey, we want to prove that Jim Irsay's around. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe they could have edited out the one win part, but I mean, hell, if Irsay says it, then he means it. So if someone's going to go up to Irsay and ask him, hey, do you want this clip out there? He's going to. I mean, someone tweeted one of the Photoshop banners in Lucas Oil Stadium of 1-0 in 2025 at me. So we'll see if that gets raised up here anytime soon. So. Yeah, I think obviously it's not a good look on that level. But, for those that were curious about Jim Irsay's health, I thought he sounded pretty good.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, so and that's been a question. So, yeah.
Kevin Bowen is our guest. He joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Kevin, Chris also highlighted the idea, or at least seemed to hint at the idea of bringing in competition at the quarterback position for Anthony Richardson. I'm not going to ask you to name a player, but if you could put in a lab the type of quarterback that would fit that proper competition mold, not just a Band-Aid veteran who you might have to break glass in case of emergency, the prototype of a player that would legitimately test him and get the type of competition Ballard's hoping for, what type of QB would that be?
Yeah, I mean, he is a free agent, so I just think it's an obvious name to throw out there, but it would be Justin Fields, of someone that, does have a similar skill set, has started games in the NFL, has had varying degrees of success and failure, is a guy that this organization really liked in the draft a few years ago. And again, kind of fits the age gap to where, okay, if all of a sudden he hits or catches fire, maybe there's something that is a little bit more there for him as a quarterback. I don't think it necessarily fits kind of the Flacco age description, or, people have mentioned the name Trey Lance. I'm like, really? Is Trey Lance a serious sort of contender? I don't think it fits the bill, but I think if the right quarterback somehow is there in the draft, and Shane Steichen identifies characteristics you like in that guy, I think you take him. Ehlinger's a free agent too, so I think it's important to – one thing I probably wouldn't have said 5-10 years ago, where quarterback health I don't think was maybe as, up in the air as it is now with more run-style QBs is, I mean, you need a quarterback room. And so that is something that I would explore as well. But, yeah, I mean, Justin Fields and that type of quarterback, we'll see what Minnesota does. Everybody seems to think Sam Darnold will be available. I'm like, boy, didn't J.J. McCarthy just have a season-ending knee injury? I don't necessarily know if that will be the case. So, yeah, Fields would probably be the one that kind of fits the script.
On the Darnold front, I'm good on that. I think he's a product of the weapons around him. He's having a great season, but I don't want to go down that path. But the Fields one,
you don't think A.D. Mitchell's Justin Jefferson? What are you talking about here, Jimmy? Come on.
Maybe another offseason will get him there. But what you bring up about Fields, I know we'll have time to answer this and opine on this as the offseason rolls on, Kevin. But let's play out Justin Fields for a second. Richardson gets hurt next year. Fields becomes the starter, and it looks like you have something there. But the operating dialogue was Ballard and Richardson are tied at the hip. I know this is a very tough question to ask, but if Fields looks like there might have something there with all the complex natures you've outlined for the franchise, is that just a happy accident win for Ballard? Or is that a deeper area where the Colts have to reevaluate a ton of stuff if they wind up being third-year injury wrong on Richardson, but hey, Justin Fields fell out of the sky. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, trust me, there's part of me that's like, really, a sixth chance at quarterback? I mean, post-luck, I'm saying. That would be the number. I mean, that just seems extreme to me. I don't know. There's part of me that's like, I'll cross that bridge when it comes. It's still, I mean, even Pittsburgh. And like, if I'm Fields, I mean, is there a part of you that just wants to run it back in Pittsburgh? I mean, how old is Russell Wilson? Wilson strikes as a dude that wants to never stop playing the game of football, but, I mean, he's got to be close to, 37, something like that? So that would be something that I think you have to think about as well. But, yeah, I largely think they're all now tied at the hip, but, again, good luck predicting Ursa.
Kevin, at what point last night were you convinced Notre Dame was going to win?
I mean, really not until the field goal went through. I thought Greg McElroy, who I really, really like, I thought he couldn't have been more off base and acting like if Jeremiah Love somehow broke through the line of scrimmage, he needed to fall down to burn the clock. I'm like, were you born yesterday, Greg? Do you know how college kickers work? And really, with Mitch Jeter this season, as much as he's battled a groin injury, Notre Dame has just been unable to block field goals. And by block, I mean protect for their field goal kicker. I mean, Indiana blocked one, back in that game. So, I mean, really not until, Lance Stevenson blew the field goal back in like he used to do in Miami to LeBron James's ear.
I'll tell you one thing Marcus Freeman did last night, Kevin, to me, and I'm an outsider, right? I'm not an avid weekly Notre Dame watcher, but I do like Marcus Freeman. After the game, he did something that I thought was very, very compelling in terms of leadership. He was asked, and at this point you probably didn't see it because understandably you were probably celebrating or whatever, and Jimmy was doing his video running around the house or whatever it is you guys do. And he was asked in the postgame on the field about Jeter and kicking that field goal. And he almost defiantly looked at the camera and said, he's been clutch for us all year. Now, I don't know how many people that follow Notre Dame week in and week out believe that. I don't know that Jeter would believe that. But Freeman said it in a way that led you to believe that Freeman believes that. And what I saw right there was a guy reinforcing that he believes in his guy and that circumstances might have been such that he wasn't the kicker that he should be, but it wasn't because he isn't the kicker that he should be. And to me, that was the perfect encapsulation of the subtleties that make guys buy in. And that team, to me, looks like a team that is 100% bought in and is totally on a collision path to then get beat by 17 points by Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, I think the overall thought of they're totally bought in is, 130% accurate. As far as Jeter's concerned, he made a couple of massive kicks in the opener at Texas A&M. Obviously one of the more hostile environments and really huge just to preserve that victory. Then
they don't get that win. They don't make the playoffs, right?
Correct. Yeah. Then he gets hurt, and I think every time Freeman was really asked about it, he's like, guys, Mitch is hurt, and we also can't block. So, like, whatever. If he's 90% and now the field goal is coming out a little bit lower than normal, that's contributing to some of the issues. So I think, Freeman actually kind of stood by him publicly a lot more than maybe I thought of in describing some of the issues. And then, probably the one benefit for them, having that month off. I know their health has been talked about a lot, and I do think it, very well could catch up to them on, a week from Monday. The fact that, he got the month off before the IU game was huge, because against USC, he missed like a 28-yarder, 29-yarder in that season finale. So I think the overall messaging, though, of like, we have a ton of confidence, and our actions will speak to that as well. And that is like, they're uber aggressive. I mean, last night was really the first time they haven't done anything tricky on special teams, I would argue, all season. I mean, they went for a fake, backed up against USC very early in that game, with Tyler Buckner, the former quarterback who transferred to Alabama and came back to play lacrosse at Notre Dame. I mean, like, they are – I mean, he's got some Dan Campbell vibes in the aggression. Again, I don't think scenarios necessarily increased or popped up last night to where you do some of that stuff, but that's kind of been their MO throughout their 14 games. So, I think he's got a lot of qualities. It's just, players coach, I know, can be a very cliche thing, but I think it's pretty real.
Kevin, in terms of your outlook on it, we asked Tom Noy about this earlier, and he basically said that Irish fans should stop worrying about the other shoe dropping because of all the depth that they have shown, the level of, I don't want to go too hyperbolic on it, but you outlined it, all the injuries they've had and next man up and everybody rising to the occasion. You kind of insinuated, though, will it matter a week from Monday and finally catch up to them? I assume you're in the same realm as I am of Ohio State's the one where I worry about that happening just because of how dynamic they have, and especially on the defensive end, how much Notre Dame has lost this year.
Yeah, and, I try to put in Colts terms for people. I mean, Notre Dame is right now dealing with no Bernard Ryman, no Ryan Kelly, no Will Fries, no Latu, Kwity Paye, and DeForest Buckner. That's and their All-American corner was lost for the season. I mean, and obviously that's not good for Ohio State. So, their ability to withstand that with depth and then certainly coach around it is just, it's rather incredible. And that's why I was so stunned by last night. Frankly, I thought the extended halftime probably helped them greatly, just with how beat up they looked in that first half, just to kind of catch their breath literally for as long as halftime was there. And, I don't know if I made this analogy to you guys, but, I kind of feel about this Notre Dame season like Purdue last year, basketball-wise, in that, Ohio State, I think, can be viewed a little bit in UConn's light. Don't know maybe if it's apples to apples, but, everyone will be picking them by a significant amount if and when they are playing a week from Monday. And at this point for Notre Dame, if you would have told any Notre Dame fan at the start of the year, you will get to the national championship game, they would have said, where do I sign up?
Totally.
If they would have said you're going to beat Georgia and, I think a quality Penn State team, you would have said, where do I sign up? And, that's pretty much how Purdue's season, was in basketball. You got the big monkey off your back of, since 1980. And for Notre Dame's case, it has the feeling of you've accomplished more than you did even in 2012, getting to that national title. The fact that you beat Georgia, the fact that you won also an Orange Bowl. I get the format has changed, but I hate to play, and I don't want to play the full you're just playing with house money, because these opportunities don't grow on trees, and you got to take advantage of them. But I do think largely, you're going to look back on the season, no matter what happens a week from Monday, and be like, damn, that hasn't happened. I think I can say in my lifetime.
Now here's Kevin. You mentioned. Are you going to Atlanta?
I am, yeah. If anybody has tickets, my DMs are open. I have a flight and I have an Airbnb, but I do not have access to a ticket.
Well, so you're flying down?
Yes, flying down, bought tickets probably at the Plymouth exit on the way home from the Indiana game. Yeah, got a very nice price. Flying down Sunday, fly back Tuesday.
Okay. I will tell you this. I went to a Clemson national title game where I went down. I think you knew this, Kevin. Went down to Tampa, had cash in my pocket to buy a ticket. I went solo. I mean, my cousin lives down there. And I'm like, I'm just going to go to the game and buy a ticket day of game. Problem is, Clemson and Alabama are both relatively close to Tampa. So it was not inexpensive. And I just said, you know what? It outpriced me. So I just went just to be at the stadium and be in the environment was awesome. And just to be around people. And then, of course, Clemson won. So even if you don't get a ticket, it'll be cool. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's largely where I think I will end up, is just getting there and, again, fingers crossed. And I get it's going to be an incredibly hot ticket no matter if it's Ohio State or Texas. And, I don't know, maybe I start wishing bad things upon other people in their travel and that they can't make it. And all of a sudden I'm walking around the parking lot and someone says, yeah, we got an extra one, how much you got? But that's probably a big wishful thinking on my part. But again, 2012, that's really it. I did not go. I think I had some Colts obligations why I didn't go to that game against Alabama. So, yes, I think, again, it's got Purdue Monday night vibes to me back in April of, like, getting to this moment. Should be celebrated, but as soon as that ball is kicked off, I'll probably quickly shift my thinking to actually winning the game.
Kevin, listen, it seems like a fait accompli that everybody says it's going to be Ohio State, and I think Ohio State, when they play their game, is the best team in college football. But Ohio State also is prone to not play their game, and so we'll see what happens. Lastly, Carson Beck, quarterback, Georgia. He has announced his transfer. At least it appears as though he has already announced where he is going to transfer. There was a lot of thought that he was going to be the highest paid or set a record that'll probably last for 2 weeks for highest portal transfer amount. Jimmy, you got a guess on where he's going to end up?
Didn't they announce that already?
He announced it. Do you know?
Yes, I do.
So you know where it is. Yeah. Kevin, you know where it is?
Yeah, I didn't realize he had some, Instagram viral girlfriend that goes to this school.
That's right, baby. What's that?
How about Kylan on the ones and twos, ready to go right there?
I wish I could take credit for that. That was all Jake.
No, well,
Jake was ready for it.
Kylan's the one that's got to play through. Yeah, his girlfriend apparently goes to Miami, and so it's funny because he sent a ex-post Twitter tweet about it, and then you look at it, I think it's like a fake account. It's not even him, but apparently that is the case that he is going to go to Miami. I'd be curious to see what he got, considering that you remember Miami basketball, Kevin, you and I were doing the show together when they signed Nigel Pack, and it was for like $400,000, and it was like, what in the world? And I mean, now that's like, yeah, congratulations, that'll get you a backup punter. You know what I mean?
Right. And now their basketball coach has resigned after that. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Actually, yeah, he was kind of the first one to open that door, and then just said, you know what, I don't like the way the room feels. All right, Kevin, enjoy the weekend, enjoy celebrating Notre Dame's win, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, boys. Have a great weekend. Safe travels.
No Colts weekend for Kevin Bowen. Obviously, those take a back seat for quite some time. Jimmy, do you have plays of the day, by the way?
I do have some. Big wild card weekend this weekend.
Well, you got plenty of time to prep exactly what you're going to do for that, because in about 15 minutes, maybe a little under that, we will get to that in the wildly popular and yet to, again, be sponsored plays of the day from Jimmy Cook.
Why's that?
I knew, obviously, that we had the Chris Ballard presser this morning, and thank you to Kylan and to Mark Dykton for turning around the audio for that in quick fashion, because we also had a mandatory training thing to do. That's inside baseball stuff there, but there was a lot going on corporately, and of course, it wasn't until yesterday or the day before when we found out that the Ballard press conference was moved to this morning. But because we had to do a mandatory virtual meeting.
Yeah.
And the Ballard thing was going on, I had to use two different devices. So right there, kudos to my
well
old
done.
self. Yeah, thank you.
Nice job.
But knowing that in advance, the phone that I have, I just noticed it ain't holding juice like it used to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not unlike its owner. And so
There's a pill for that.
That's right. So I set up for the old Genius Bar.
Yeah.
In the mall at the phone store. I'll simply say that. And that's a whole different animal. You go in there and, I had a 4:00 appointment, and then so I go in and you're like, well, who do I let know that I'm here? And then, a guy walks over and he's got a little tablet, and so so anyway, he says, well, what do you need? I said, I just need a new battery. Well, you can upgrade your phone to this and that. Yeah, no, I don't need all that. I just give me the battery. So they said, okay, your phone will be ready at 6:05. And I said, well, listen, I've got an event at 6:45 I have to get to. So if it's better that I come back another day. No, it'll be they're very prompt. It'll definitely be ready at 6:05. I'm looking at it right here. Great.
Famous last words.
I walked in shortly after 6. I walk up, I find the guy again, and I said, I'm here to pick up my phone. And he looks at it and says, it says here that your pickup time is 6:05. And I go, yeah, that's right. And he says, well, it's 6:02. I go, okay. And he goes, looks like we got 3 minutes of diagnostics left. Okay. Then 6:05 became 6:15. Just talked to the guys. They're just putting it back together right now. They got it. 6:15 became 6:20. The guys right now, they're doing the last diagnostics. Be ready here any second. This went on for I did not get arrested, right?
Good on you.
I did not raise a scene.
Also good on you.
But two other customers started peppering me while I'm waiting for questions about which model I have of my phone. And I'm telling them, and I mean literally, this is like an Amish guy going to a Corvette convention, right? I mean, literally, these two guys are looking at each other like snickering to one another, like, well, should we start a GoFundMe? Did you hear what model he has?
They want to put you in a museum?
Correct. They're like, really? That's still like they're literally calling other people. They're like, do you know the newest model
Tom,
of this?
Get over
yes,
here.
The newest model of this has such an excellent phone video camera on it that let us show you. And why would you want to videotape me? Well, because we want to actually submit this to the Smithsonian. That we actually just found one of that version of the phone still in the wild. Now, my phone is like 3 years old, maybe, right? And the guy says, then the guy comes and he goes, well, I got to admit, this is in like near pristine condition. It's as if you've had it in an OtterBox the whole time. Well, I have. This is incredible. I'm like,
did he take a picture with you?
I didn't just
phone?
drive here on a Model T Ford. I mean, you know what I mean? And I said, well, so let me ask you. Sure, you want to update me because it's there's a special right now. It's okay, great. What does that phone do that this one doesn't? Oh, the zoom on the camera is incredible. Yeah, okay. I mean, I work in media. What do you mean? Well, I mean, I work for one of my two jobs is for one of the largest television production companies in the United States. So, I have access to pretty good cameras, right? What else am I missing? Well, the camera's incredible. Now, I know that. I ain't making home porn. What are we doing here? What's the advantage? Well, the camera, though, and okay, so I need all new plugs, all new everything. Yeah, I'll just stick with the one I got. It works fine.
You know what that guy could also do? He was really good at explaining what was special about Andrew Luck. Same kind of thing going on there with the iPhone.
He kind of looked like Andrew Luck, if you really want to know the truth.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I can't wait to see the exhibit. I hope you're there.
That's right. That's right.
7 to 9.
When you get there, if you walk in and just past the Betamax display is where they have the picture of me with my phone. Jimmy's up next, and we'll have plays of the day.
Today's plays of the day with extended plays all the way into the sports weekend. Ohio State and Texas in the second of the two college football semifinal games. It's the Cotton Bowl in Arlington, Texas. I'll take Jeremiah Smith of Ohio State as an anytime touchdown scorer. I will also lay the 6.5 comfortably on the Buckeyes. They're favored by 6.5 tonight against the Longhorns. If that's the Ohio State team we're going to get, which is the highly explosive, offensive, any wide receiver could start for the Colts type of team we've seen the last 2 rounds of the playoffs, I think they win comfortably tonight against Texas. Wild card weekend begins on Saturday. A couple plays throughout the weekend. I'll take the Chargers to win the money line on the road against the Houston Texans. On Sunday in the Bills-Broncos game, I'll take Buffalo Bills running back James Cook as an anytime touchdown scorer. 4:30, it's the Packers and the Eagles in Philadelphia. Packers are getting 5.5, so I'll scoop up the 5.5 points there for the Packers as 5.5-point underdogs against the Eagles. Last one for you, what is effectively the Sunday night football game, the Commanders and the Buccaneers. Give me Jaden Daniels and Washington on the money line over Tampa Bay. So Ohio State minus 6.5, Jeremiah Smith anytime touchdown scorer, Chargers over Texans, James Cook anytime touchdown scorers, Packers plus 5.5, Commanders over the Buccaneers. Those are your plays of the day.
Jimmy, can I mention, I'm actually really disappointed that I didn't share my bets from yesterday.
Ooh.
Because I took the over in the Notre Dame game, and I left pretty content. So I would agree with the Ohio State minus 6. That's what I'm going for. But here's one to add with that.
You're adding
if you
one.
may.
Yes, please.
In college basketball, I'm going to take Toledo minus 3.5 over Central Michigan.
All right.
It's at minus 130, so feeling pretty
I like
good.
that a lot. Lay the 3.5 with Toledo. Let's go.
If I may.
You always can. Your show's on the, or your name's on the board last I saw.
Here's what I know about you, Kylan.
Oh, man.
You do an extraordinary job filling in as a producer on a rotating basis on a number of different shows within this radio family. And in addition to that, you are a both stage and screen actress, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You
No
are a
lies.
native, if I'm not mistaken, of, and I could be wrong in this, you spent time in Colorado, but then your family moved here, and I'm going to say smaller town just south of here. Is that right?
Yep, correct.
Okay. And with that, I'm not going to say that you have spent, and it's unfair and potentially misogynistic of me to assume that because you are a woman, that means that you've not dove deep into the sports gambling realm of things. That's totally unfair. We know that, right? But
Appreciate it.
But because you abstained yesterday from making any wagers, I assumed that you were one that was relatively new to this. And then you come out of it with you're going to wager, and you've been studying, crunching the numbers on Toledo and Central Michigan.
Yep.
Now, this is like somebody saying, I've never had a drink before, but I'd like, if I could, to just get a Long Island, but only with 151. And I mean, like that's going, like, if you're, how in the world did you pick Toledo and Central Michigan?
I liked the bets. 130 is pretty good for me. I really like my parlays. I like to go along with.
All right.
I like looking into the players and going for the rebounds, and I like that. But this one seemed like the one I was most confident in for our audience.
Here's why I'm thrilled with it. Her first step up to the plate officially is Maction, and not just
I mean,
Maction.
that's what I mean.
It is hovering around 500.
Like this
teams.
is okay. So,
Maction.
Kylan, just so
This
you
is
know,
beautiful.
So I've told the story before of when I worked at Channel 6, and we would get off the air for the late show, and we'd be putting together the show for the next day and assignments and everything else. So we would get out of there at like 12:30, 1 o'clock at night. And the phone would ring. 269-1434 was the number. Okay, probably still is. And the phone would ring, okay? And so I'd answer the phone. Sports. Yeah, do you happen to have the final in the Northern Arizona and Alaska Anchorage game? Yeah, let me look on the wire here. Hang on just a second. You said Northern Arizona, Alaska Alaska Fairbanks? No, Alaska Anchorage. 87. Looked like it was 87-82 was the final. Did that one off as a 5.5 or a 5-point game? And so I would say, well, you need the number for Gamblers Anonymous. Now, that was a very impressive breakdown that you just did here for the very first time that you've just come out of the woodwork with, oh, by the way, let me break this down for you. That was impressive.
I appreciate it.
Central
Thank
Michigan,
you.
by the way, coached by former 1989 North Central basketball star and Indiana All-Star snub Tony Barbee. He is the coach at Central Michigan. And Derek Mays, another great player at North Central, his son Hudson, who plays basketball out in California, just committed to play for Tony Barbee next year. And Tony Barbee's mother is the official team mom of Query & Company.
Really?
And, oh, yeah. She's called the show before. She's fabulous. She's
It's
the
a
best.
coveted title to have.
She's the absolute best.
By the way, another Nostradamus tip for you.
Okay.
You predicted something, albeit marred in, tragedy and very dark times out in California, but you did use the Jake Stradamus to envision out what was
early in the week when
yes.
I said, guys, I'm curious if the NFL playoff game is going to get moved.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it has. Each game in the NFL does have contingency backup stadiums should something happen. The NFL is exercising that with the game between the Vikings and the Rams now being moved from SoFi Field to Phoenix is where they will play it.
Saw
right in
on
Glendale.
Twitter a collection of, that is correct, a collection of, I assume, people with the Rams, but mentioning that, look, I get it, sports are clearly backseat to everything that's going out there, but at least on the Rams side, they have partnered with their season ticket holders to have shuttles or travel arrangements help built in to be able to get everybody to Phoenix to get to watch the Rams and have a happy distraction from all the devastation that's been out there.
Yeah, right? Yeah, because it's been tough. One other thing that I was going to mention when you were talking about parlays and whatever else, I never come up with one, but I have a parlay for you. You ready?
Yes.
Ooh.
It's the most excited Kylan's been all day.
3.5.
I'm taking notes.
3.5.
Uh-huh.
Over under number of snaps that Arch Manning takes tonight.
Ooh, I like that a lot. I'm going to say under. I think this is Quinn Ewers' game. I think he stays healthy. I'll go under.
What was the over-under on Ballard looks today?
He didn't wear a hat.
No, he didn't, did he?
No hat.
Is that meaningful?
He did drop a couple of profanities.
Like, water from that really cruddy tasting water, that aluminum bottle of water they used to drink all the time.
He's good, but he keeps the cap on it, and he does that. Your overall thoughts? J&V has joined us now and will be up next. Your thoughts on
really? It was a lot of the same. I'm absolutely floored that you are this far in your life as a competitor and don't realize competition is necessary within a positional or your building. I mean, I don't care if it's year 1, year 8, or what. I mean, what the hell? You just realized that this year? Hey, yeah, maybe some competition. So I thought that was silly. And then he doesn't think they're close, but Steichen 3 days ago said they were close. So, once again, you get an organization that's mixed messaged as hell. And that whole thing, all you really have to do is own it, and then everybody just is diffused because he's coming back, and that's set in stone, and you just have to wait and see what's going to happen. And he believes in Richardson, and he believes in this. But the whole thing has failed for him. I mean, it has failed. And there's no way around that.
I just thought the messaging, John, in all honesty, if we would have pulled the audio from the 21 season or the 22 season and played some of those today, would anybody have known the difference?
Yeah. No. Who was the chicken blank player in the Athletic?
So
who do we think that was?
Okay, so what he was talking about, for those that don't know, James Boyd and Zach Kiefer had a column in The Athletic where they interviewed one veteran player who said this is a franchise that has no vision, that there's no vision with the franchise, and that's the challenge. And Chris Ballard said, look, we need to keep some things in-house. Guys talked a lot, and he said, and one of them was too big a chicken blank to put his name on it. And he was a chicken blank. Who do you think it was, John? Are we guessing here? Because I'll tell you my guess. If we were doing this
did I say
if this is Family Feud, top 4 answers on the board.
I don't know. Would have been anybody like Mo Alley, would it, who was a little bit critical in the postgame? I doubt it. Why would he say anything like that? It'd have to be like Kenny Moore, maybe?
Okay, I think that's a good contender.
Kenny Moore's already been outspoken and put his name to it, so
I'll go with.
Am I allowed to say it out loud?
Yeah, sure.
You think it's Buckner?
I think it's DeForest Buckner.
Yeah.
I mean, I have nothing to base that on with DeForest Buckner. He's been very outspoken.
He wouldn't praise Buckner for being on the record, and then would he?
Well,
but
Buckner could go on the record with some things and then go, hey, listen, like, here's bottom line, man.
Whoever it was, they clearly weren't wrong because it's bothered Ballard enough to call it out in public.
Ryan Kelly? Is that possible?
Look over at Newt Rockney sitting to my left here. Good God almighty, man.
I rode it on a horse today, believe it or not.
That's actually Jerry Faust era starter jacket that Jimmy's got on, right? Yeah. 100-year anniversary of the Four Horsemen season, by the way.
That was a fun game last night, though.
Great.
I did enjoy that a great deal. You
very
you
good
knew
game.
the Penn State quarterback was going to blank it all up, though. You just
John, you're the one.
As soon as McElroy said, "Well, I think you got to be aggressive," and the homes are right there down the middle.
Listen,
off the back
you're the
foot.
one person that can relate to my analogy where I said every Penn State game in the last 20 years that's marquee feels like Full Metal Jacket.
Yes,
starts out great.
Eddie Murphy Raw. You go 45 minutes, and the rest of it sucks.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Yep.
All right, John's up next, and we will be back with you Monday at noon. Thanks for listening to Aquarian Company.